The meeting room fell silent as Marcia from HR slid the document across the table. "We know you've been working 2 jobs, Ginny," she said with cold confidence. "Hand over all related code immediately." My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. 6 months of meticulous documentation had prepared me for this moment. I smiled and replied, "Sure, I'll send everything first thing tomorrow." Their smug faces showed they thought they'd won. By morning, their entire homepage displayed one line: "Property of Ginny Taylor." The real game had just begun. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. But when you find a company that seems to align perfectly with your values, you tend to overlook the little things that don't quite add up. My name is Ginny Taylor. I'm a software engineer specializing in cybersecurity and ethical hacking. For as long as I can remember, code has been my language of choice. While other kids played video games, I wanted to create them. When friends worried about social media privacy, I built encryption tools to protect them. By 22, I'd already developed security solutions that caught the attention of several tech companies. Tech Dynamics was the one that captured my heart. Based in Austin, it had the perfect blend of startup energy and established credibility. Their recruiting materials showcased a progressive workplace culture that celebrated innovation and integrity. When Jack Harmon, the charismatic CEO, personally called to offer me a position on their security team, I accepted without hesitation. "We want people who think beyond conventional boundaries," Jack said during my orientation. "Your ideas matter here." I remember how his warm smile and firm handshake made me feel valued. Tech Dynamics isn't just a company, we're a family building the future together. The first few months lived up to my expectations. My team was talented and collaborative. My direct manager, Daniel Preston, the company's CTO, was brilliant if somewhat distant. He'd made his name developing security solutions for major banks before co-founding Tech Dynamics. His technical skills were undeniable, but I soon noticed how he took credit for team accomplishments during executive meetings. Daniel's not so bad once you understand his quirks. My best friend Allison from the marketing department would say whenever I expressed frustration, "Just document everything." CYA is the unofficial company motto. "Cover your assets" became our inside joke. But Allison's advice would prove more valuable than either of us anticipated. Outside of work, I continued developing a personal project I'd started during grad school. A comprehensive security framework called Secure Shield that integrated multiple protection layers into a seamless system. I worked on it evenings and weekends using my own equipment in my small apartment. The project was my passion, something I believed could genuinely change how companies approached cybersecurity. During lunch breaks, I sometimes discussed general concepts from my project with colleagues. Not the code itself, but the philosophical approach to security I was developing. "Your ideas about adaptive security barriers are fascinating," Daniel mentioned after overhearing one such conversation. "We should discuss them more formally sometime." I was flattered by his interest, but maintained appropriate boundaries. "This is just a personal project I'm exploring in my free time," I explained. He nodded with what seemed like understanding. We all need creative outlets. "Still, I'd love to hear more when you're ready to share." As weeks passed, I noticed Daniel finding more reasons to discuss my work. His questions became increasingly specific, probing for technical details. Initially, I attributed his interest to professional curiosity. Then I received an email that changed everything. It was a Tuesday afternoon when my computer pinged with a message that would ultimately expose the company's true colors. The email was clearly intended for executives only, accidentally included me in the recipient list, and had the subject line, "Innovation Acquisition Strategy Q3. One paragraph stood out with chilling clarity. "We've identified several employees with promising independent projects that align with our strategic goals. Taylor's security framework shows particular potential. Daniel will continue relationship building to facilitate seamless harvesting of innovations." Legal confirms our contract language supports broad IP claims. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. They were systematically targeting employees' personal projects, and I was next on their list. I forwarded the email to my personal account before it could be recalled, then deleted it from the company system. That evening, I pulled out my employment contract and read it line by line. The intellectual property clause was intentionally vague, claiming ownership of work related to company business without clearly defining those boundaries. As I sat surrounded by pages of legal language, I realized the company I'd believed in was built on theft disguised as collaboration, but they had made a crucial mistake targeting me. Before I became a software engineer, I'd seriously considered becoming a chess player. I understood strategy, patience, and the power of anticipating your opponent's moves several steps ahead. I began documenting everything carefully starting that night. Every conversation, every email, every instance where company representatives inquired about my personal work. I added timestamps to my code repositories and secured independent verification of my development timeline. What they didn't know was that I had already created multiple safeguards within my code. If someone attempted to claim it as their own, the system would reveal its true creator. It was my insurance policy, one I hoped I'd never need to activate. As I closed my laptop that night, I had no idea how quickly things would escalate. Within days, the trap would begin closing around me. But sometimes the predator becomes the prey, especially when they underestimate their target. The summons to HR came the following week. The email from Marsha Wilson, the HR director, seemed innocent enough. Routine performance review discussion, 2 p.m., conference room B. I knew better. Performance reviews were scheduled months in advance and conducted by direct supervisors. This was something else entirely. When I arrived, Marsha wasn't alone. Daniel sat beside her, along with a man I'd never met who introduced himself as Frank Thompson, legal counsel for Tech Dynamics. The room felt suddenly smaller, the air heavier. "Thank you for joining us, Ginny," Marsha began, her voice professionally pleasant but her eyes cold. "We wanted to discuss some concerns that have come to our attention." I maintained a neutral expression. "Of course. What concerns?" Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Our security protocols include monitoring network activity on company devices. We've noticed you've been working on substantial coding projects outside your assigned tasks." "My personal project," I clarified, "which I work on using my own equipment, on my own time." Frank Thompson cleared his throat. "Miss Taylor, your employment contract clearly states that intellectual property related to the company's business interests falls under company ownership, regardless of when or where it's developed." "My contract doesn't claim ownership of independent work created without company resources," I countered. Marsha slid a document across the table. "This is a formal request for you to submit all code related to your security project for review. The company needs to determine proper ownership." I scanned the document, noting the carefully crafted language attempting to establish an admission of potential company rights. "I'm not comfortable signing this without legal review." Frank's expression hardened. "Refusing to cooperate could be considered a violation of your employment terms. Requesting legal counsel before signing documents isn't refusal," I replied calmly. "It's due diligence." The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, with increasing pressure tactics. They alternated between veiled threats and appeals to company loyalty. I maintained my position, neither agreeing nor explicitly refusing their demands. "We'll give you 48 hours to reconsider," Marsha finally concluded. "This doesn't need to become adversarial." That evening, I called my brother Thomas. As an intellectual property attorney with a background in tech, he was perfectly positioned to help navigate the situation. "They're overreaching," Thomas confirmed after I explained the situation. "Your contract has the standard catch-all language, but you've been careful to use your own equipment and time. That establishes clear boundaries. So they can't claim my work? Legally? It's murky enough that they might try, but they'd face an uphill battle. The problem is resources. They have an entire legal team and deep pockets. They might be counting on you backing down rather than fighting. Thomas helped me draft a measured response that acknowledged their concerns without conceding any ownership rights. We also documented the meeting in detail while it was fresh in my memory. Over the next few days, I noticed subtle changes in the workplace atmosphere. Colleagues who normally sought me out for lunch began finding excuses to be elsewhere. My access to certain development servers was quietly restricted. Messages went unanswered for longer periods. I wasn't paranoid. I was being isolated. Determined to understand what I was facing, I began discreetly researching company practices. In the break room, I overheard two senior developers discussing a colleague who'd left abruptly the previous year. "Such a shame about Stephanie," one said. "Her distributed processing algorithm was brilliant." "Yeah, then suddenly it's part of the enterprise suite and she's gone," the other replied. "Classic tech dynamics move." That night, I searched for Stephanie Madison online and found her professional profile. She now worked for a small startup in Denver. Taking a chance, I sent her a message explaining I was a Tech Dynamics employee with questions about her experience. To my surprise, she responded within hours and agreed to a video call. "I wondered when someone else would figure it out," Stephanie said, her expression a mixture of sympathy and vindication. "Let me guess. You created something valuable on your own time, mentioned it at work, and now they're claiming it belongs to them?" "Exactly that," I confirmed. "You're not alone. I know at least 6 other developers who experienced the same thing. Most gave in because fighting seemed impossible." Stephanie shared details about her own experience, how she'd developed a unique approach to distributed computing outside work hours. Mentioned it to Daniel during a team innovation session, and suddenly found herself excluded from meetings. 3 months later, a suspiciously similar technology appeared in the company's flagship product. And when she raised concerns, she was terminated for performance issues. "Do you have any advice?" I asked. "Document everything. And look into their recent product announcements. You might find they're already planning to use your work." Following her advice, I began digging deeper into Tech Dynamics' upcoming releases. What I discovered sent a chill down my spine. The company had recently announced a new comprehensive security solution to be unveiled at the upcoming tech conference in 3 weeks. The press release included buzzwords and concepts eerily similar to my Secure Shield framework. They weren't just planning to steal my work, they were already marketing it. As I continued my investigation, I discovered something even more disturbing. During a routine system update 3 months earlier, IT had performed security maintenance on employee computers. Comparing notes with Allison confirmed that during this maintenance, they had installed enhanced monitoring software, targeting specific employees including me. This had been done at Jack's direct instruction. According to a private Slack message Allison had accidentally accessed while working on the company communication portal. My suspicions had graduated to certainty. Tech Dynamics wasn't just opportunistically claiming employee innovations, they were systematically targeting and extracting them. The next morning, Marcia called me into her office. Daniel was already seated when I arrived. "Have you had time to consider our request?" she asked. "I have," I replied. "And I'd like clarification on exactly what you're claiming and why." Daniel sighed with exaggerated patience. "Ginny, your security framework clearly relates to company business. We're simply ensuring proper attribution and ownership." "You mean the framework I began developing before joining Tech Dynamics? The one I've worked on exclusively with my own resources?" "The timing is irrelevant," Marcia interjected. "The contract language is clear." "Is it?" "Because I've consulted with legal experts who disagree." Daniel's expression darkened. "I hope you understand the implications of your position. Tech Dynamics has invested considerably in your professional development. Fighting this would be unwise for your career prospects." The threat was thinly veiled. Submit or be blacklisted. "We're prepared to be reasonable. Marcia added. A proper attribution credit, and a modest bonus in exchange for full transfer of rights. I maintained my composure, but inside, my determination hardened. I'll need more time to consider the options. As I walked back to my desk, the full scope of their scheme became clear. They had been systematically monitoring me, gathering information, and preparing to claim my work. Now they were escalating to outright intimidation. What they didn't realize was that every threat, every meeting, every manipulative tactic was strengthening my resolve and adding to my growing collection of evidence. They thought they had me cornered, but I was placing my pieces strategically across the board, and I was just getting started. The pressure intensified over the following days. My performance reviews, previously stellar, suddenly contained vague concerns about collaboration difficulties and alignment with company objectives. My project deadlines tightened while resources became inexplicably unavailable. Technical issues plagued my company workstation, requiring frequent IT assistance that inevitably involved intrusive access to my system. Through it all, I maintained a facade of concerned cooperation while continuing my investigation. Stephanie had given me names of other former employees with similar experiences. One by one, I reached out to them, building a disturbing picture of systematic exploitation. Sarah Jenkins, a former senior developer who had worked at Tech Dynamics for 3 years, agreed to meet me for coffee on a Saturday afternoon. We chose a small cafe 20 miles outside Austin to avoid running into company personnel. I never thought they'd be so blatant about it, Sarah said after I described my situation. Her hands trembled slightly as she held her mug. When it happened to me, they were much more subtle. Sarah had developed an innovative user authentication system while working at Tech Dynamics. Unlike my situation, she had used some company resources but had done the core development during a company-sanctioned Innovation Week, where employees were encouraged to explore personal projects. They promoted it as a way to foster creativity, Sarah explained. What they didn't mention was the fine print that gave them ownership of anything created during that time. When her authentication system was incorporated into the company's products without credit or compensation, Sarah had confronted management. Within 2 weeks, she was fired for creating a hostile work environment. After I was gone, they filed patents on my technology. Jack and Daniel are listed as the inventors. The bitterness in her voice was palpable. Did you consider fighting back? I asked. On what grounds? I signed their contracts. They made sure everything was technically legal, if completely unethical. She paused, studying me. You're different, though. You've been careful. I have documentation proving independent development, I confirmed. But they're still coming after my work. Sarah leaned forward intently. Then you need to understand why. Tech Dynamics doesn't go to these lengths unless something significant is at stake. Her insight proved invaluable. Back at home, I began researching the company's financial situation more thoroughly. Tech Dynamics had always projected an image of sustainable growth and innovation leadership. But digging beneath the surface revealed concerning patterns. Their last 3 quarterly reports showed declining revenue despite upbeat press releases. Major client renewals had decreased, and their stock had dropped 15% over 6 months. Most significantly, industry blogs mentioned rumors that Apex Systems, their largest client accounting for nearly 30% of annual revenue, was considering switching providers due to security concerns. The pieces clicked into place. Tech Dynamics was struggling, and they needed a major win to retain Apex and reassure shareholders. My Secure Shield framework, with its innovative approach to adaptive security, represented a potential lifeline they could quickly implement with minimal development costs. They weren't just stealing my work, they were desperate for it. Armed with this knowledge, I expanded my investigation, focusing on the company's planned security product announcement. Through careful networking and some discreet research, I obtained a copy of the preliminary marketing materials being prepared for the tech conference. The described features matched my framework with barely disguised terminology. They had already begun incorporating my concepts into their product roadmap. The most disturbing discovery came during a late evening at the office. While everyone else had left, I accessed the shared drive containing the Apex account documents, which my security clearance technically allowed. There I found a proposal specifically addressing Apex's concerns with a solution suspiciously similar to SecureShield, promised for delivery within 2 months, a timeline only possible if they already had my completed code. They weren't just planning to steal my work. They were actively selling it before they even had it. The next day brought another confrontation, this time with the full weight of company authority behind it. Jack himself joined Marcia, Daniel, and Frank in the executive conference room. The pretense of a routine matter had been abandoned. "Ginny," Jack began with the charismatic warmth that had once seemed genuine, "I wanted to personally address this situation. Your talents are valuable to us, and this disagreement is unnecessary." "Is it a disagreement when one party systematically monitors another and attempts to claim their independent work?" I asked calmly. Jack's smile tightened. "We encourage innovation, but we also protect company interests. The security framework you've developed clearly falls within our domain. A framework I began before joining Tech Dynamics and developed entirely with my own resources," Frank interjected. "Your contract clearly states that any intellectual property related to the company's business interests falls under company ownership." "My contract doesn't claim ownership of independent work created without company resources," I countered, echoing my earlier position. "Let's be practical," Daniel said. "You're a talented engineer, but you lack the resources to bring this product to market. Tech Dynamics can make your ideas reality." "While erasing my contribution?" I asked. "We're offering attribution and compensation," Marcia noted. "After threatening my career if I don't comply." Jack's expression hardened. "No one is threatening you, Ginny, but actions have consequences. Fighting your employer on this would make future employment difficult. Silicon Valley is smaller than you think." The threat of industry blacklisting hung in the air. "We need your decision," Frank said. "Either sign the transfer documents, or we'll be forced to consider termination for contract violation and pursue legal remedies to protect company intellectual property." I looked at each of them in turn. These people, who had built a successful company by systematically exploiting the creativity of their employees. In that moment, I understood completely what I was facing and what I needed to do. "I'll need 24 hours to review the documents with my attorney," I said. Jack nodded, clearly believing they had won. "That's reasonable. We'll expect your signed agreement by this time tomorrow." As I walked back to my desk, I could feel colleagues watching me. Word had spread that I was in trouble. Most avoided eye contact, fearing association would taint them as well. Only Allison dared to approach, slipping me a note. "Whatever you need, I'm with you." That small gesture of solidarity strengthened my resolve. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for Sarah, Stephanie, and everyone else whose innovations had been stolen. For Allison and every employee who deserved better than exploitation disguised as opportunity. That evening, I discovered one final damning piece of evidence. Through a carefully established back channel, I obtained a copy of the board presentation for the upcoming quarterly review. It outlined executive bonuses tied directly to the Apex contract renewal, which hinged on delivering the promised security solution, my security solution. Jack, Daniel, Marcia, and other executives stood to receive millions in bonuses for successfully implementing my stolen work. The depth of their corruption was breathtaking. I worked through the night, preparing for what would come next. By morning, I had my strategy fully mapped out. They thought I was cornered, left with no choice but surrender. They had no idea what was coming. As the sun rose over Austin, I sent a simple email. "I'm prepared to discuss terms for my security framework. Please schedule a final meeting at your convenience." The response came within minutes. The meeting was set for 10 a.m. They were eager to claim their prize. unaware they were walking into a trap of my own design. Chess has always been about thinking several moves ahead. They were playing checkers. With less than 24 hours before the final confrontation, I needed to solidify my position and prepare my countermove. The evidence I'd gathered painted a clear picture of systematic exploitation, but documentation alone wouldn't be enough. I needed leverage that would force Tech Dynamics to back down. My first step was establishing a secure communication channel with other affected employees, both current and former. Using encrypted messaging and anonymous email accounts, I created a protected space where we could share experiences and evidence without company monitoring. Within hours, 12 former employees and 4 current ones had joined the group. Their stories followed a disturbing pattern that revealed an even darker aspect of Tech Dynamics practices. They specifically targeted women and minorities, wrote a former UX designer named Ashley. We were less likely to have the resources or connections to fight back effectively. Data shared by the group confirmed her observation. Of the 16 cases we documented, 14 involved women or people of color. The company had deliberately exploited those they perceived as vulnerable, adding discrimination to their list of offenses. While the group continued sharing evidence, I focused on understanding Tech Dynamics' financial situation in greater detail. With help from a former finance department employee, I gained insight into just how desperate their position had become. The company had taken on substantial debt to fund expansion, betting heavily on retaining and growing the Apex Systems contract. Internal projections showed that losing Apex would trigger loan covenant violations, potentially forcing layoffs or even bankruptcy. The executive team had everything riding on the security solution they planned to build with my stolen work. I also discovered exactly what they'd promised Apex. The client had experienced several security breaches in the past year and needed a comprehensive solution before their next compliance audit in 3 months. Tech Dynamics had guaranteed delivery of an advanced security framework, precisely matching Secure Shield's capabilities within 8 weeks, a timeline that explained their increasingly aggressive tactics. Armed with this knowledge, I began implementing my counter strategy while appearing to cooperate. I drafted a seemingly reasonable counteroffer that included specific technical requirements for how my code would be integrated into their systems. These requirements appeared innocuous but would actually enable my contingency plan if activated. For technical support, I reached out to Sam Wright, a college friend who had become an ethical hacker and security consultant. After explaining my situation, Sam agreed to help create a sophisticated digital watermark for my code, something that couldn't be removed without destroying functionality, and would activate under specific conditions. "This is elegant," Sam said as we finalized the implementation over a secure connection. "If they try to claim ownership without proper attribution, the system will reveal the truth in a way they can't hide." While Sam helped with technical safeguards, I worked on legal protections. With Thomas's guidance, I prepared documentation establishing clear ownership of my work, including time-stamped repositories, development logs, and witness statements from colleagues who had seen me working on the project before joining Tech Dynamics. I also took the precaution of filing a provisional patent application covering key aspects of Secure Shield. While this wouldn't immediately protect me, it would establish a formal record of my claim predating any company filings. As these preparations continued, I maintained the appearance of a defeated employee ready to surrender. When Daniel stopped by my desk to check in, I projected resignation and reluctant acceptance. "I just want this resolved," I told him with carefully calibrated weariness. Fighting the company was never my intention. He nodded with poorly concealed satisfaction. "I'm glad you're taking the reasonable approach. This really is the best outcome for everyone. I'm sure the board will be pleased with how you've handled this," I added innocently, "especially with the Apex contract at stake." A flicker of surprise crossed his face at my knowledge of the situation, quickly masked by corporate smoothness. "We all want the company to succeed. Your contribution will be noted." That's all I ever wanted. Proper recognition. As he walked away, I allowed myself a small smile. Everything was proceeding according to plan. That evening, With technical and legal preparations complete, I faced the emotional reality of what lay ahead. The confrontation would be intense, and the outcome wasn't guaranteed. I might lose my job, face legal challenges, or even suffer industry blacklisting. The stakes were enormous. Seeking perspective, I called my mentor from graduate school, Professor Eleanor Garcia, who had guided me through difficult decisions before. "You've always had two qualities that set you apart," she said after listening to my situation. "Brilliant technical skills and unwavering integrity. Don't compromise either. But the risk is significant," she acknowledged. "But so is the alternative, allowing a corrupt system to continue exploiting people's creativity and hard work. Sometimes principles require courage." Her words strengthened my resolve. This wasn't just about my code anymore. It was about standing up to systematic exploitation that had harmed many before me, and would harm many more if left unchallenged. Before sleeping, I reviewed my strategy one final time, checking for vulnerabilities or oversights. The plan was sound, the preparations thorough. Tech Dynamics believed they held all the power in our upcoming meeting, but they had fundamentally misunderstood the situation. They saw me as an isolated employee they could intimidate into compliance. They didn't realize I had built a community of allies, gathered compelling evidence, and created technical safeguards they couldn't override. Most importantly, they didn't understand that I had anticipated this conflict from the beginning and had been preparing for it while they thought they were setting their trap. As I finally drifted toward sleep, I felt surprisingly calm. Tomorrow would bring confrontation and possibly chaos, but also the opportunity to right a long-standing wrong. For all their resources and power, Tech Dynamics had made a critical mistake in their calculations. They had chosen the wrong opponent. Morning arrived with a clarity that comes from absolute certainty. I dressed carefully, choosing a professional outfit that projected confidence without aggression. The final pieces of my strategy were in place. Including an insurance policy, Sam had helped implement a secure cloud repository that would automatically publish evidence of Tech Dynamics practices if I didn't enter a cancellation code every 12 hours. As I walked into the office, Allison intercepted me near the elevators. "Whatever happens in there, you're not alone," she whispered, quickly squeezing my hand before walking away. With that final encouragement, I headed toward the executive conference room, ready for what would become the defining confrontation of my professional life. 10 a.m. sharp. The executive conference room had been deliberately arranged to intimidate a single empty chair facing a row of company leadership. Jack sat center, flanked by Daniel and Marcia, with Frank positioned slightly behind them, legal documents spread before him. Two additional men I recognized as board members occupied the far end of the table, observers to what they expected would be my capitulation. "Good morning, Ginny," Jack began with practiced warmth. "I appreciate your willingness to resolve this matter professionally." I took my seat, back straight, expression composed. "Professional resolution has always been my preference." Frank pushed a stack of documents toward me. "We've prepared the standard IP transfer agreement with the modifications you requested regarding attribution." I glanced at the papers without touching them. "Before we proceed, I'd like clarity on exactly what Tech Dynamics is claiming ownership of." Daniel leaned forward. "Your security framework, which clearly falls within company business interests as defined in your employment agreement. You mean Secure Shield, which I began developing 2 years before joining Tech Dynamics and have continued working on using exclusively my own resources? The timing is irrelevant given the overlap with company focus areas," Marcia interjected. "I see." I placed my own folder on the table. "And Tech Dynamics believes it has legal standing to claim ownership despite documentation proving independent development?" Frank's expression tightened. "Miss Taylor, the contract language gives the company rights to innovations related to business interests, regardless of when development began. Even when those innovations were created without company resources and carefully segregated from company work, the relationship to company business is what matters legally." I nodded thoughtfully. And Tech Dynamics is willing to pursue this claim despite the potential consequences? The consequences are primarily yours to consider, Jack said, his friendly facade slipping slightly. Refusing to honor your contractual obligations would have significant impact on your career prospects. I wasn't referring to consequences for me, I clarified. I meant for Tech Dynamics. The subtle shift in the room was palpable. Exchanged glances, slight adjustments in posture. I'm not sure I follow, Jack said carefully. Let me be more specific. Tech Dynamics is currently at risk of losing the Apex Systems contract, which represents approximately 30% of annual revenue. Executive bonuses and possibly the company's financial stability depend on delivering a security solution that matches what I've independently developed. Am I understanding the situation correctly? The shock on their faces confirmed my intelligence was accurate. Daniel recovered first. Company financial matters aren't relevant to your IP obligations. They're relevant to understanding why you're pursuing my work so aggressively. I opened my folder and removed a single page. This is a timeline of my interactions with Tech Dynamics regarding my personal project, including the accidental email revealing your innovation harvesting strategy, the targeted monitoring of my personal devices during company security updates, and the systematic isolation tactics employed when I questioned ownership claims. I placed a second document beside it. This is a list of 16 other employees whose innovations were similarly targeted and appropriated, 14 of whom are women or people of color, suggesting a discriminatory pattern in addition to intellectual property theft. The board members stirred uncomfortably. This clearly wasn't the meeting they had expected. Frank attempted to regain control. These unsubstantiated accusations are inappropriate and potentially defamatory. They're extensively documented, I corrected him, including recorded conversations where company representatives made statements that violate labor laws. Recording conversations without consent is illegal in Texas, Frank countered quickly. In some circumstances, I acknowledged. But Texas law permits recording by a party to the conversation, which I was. It also provides exceptions for documenting potential unlawful activity, which intellectual property theft certainly qualifies as. Jack's friendly mask had completely disappeared. What exactly are you suggesting, Ginny? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating facts. Tech Dynamics has engaged in a pattern of appropriating employee innovations through contractual overreach, targeted monitoring, and intimidation. You've discriminatorily targeted those perceived as having fewer resources to fight back, and you're currently attempting to claim ownership of my independently developed security framework to salvage the Apex contract and trigger executive bonuses. I let that sink in for a moment before continuing. Now, you have a choice. You can persist with this claim, forcing me to defend my intellectual property rights through all available legal and public channels. Or we can discuss a legitimate licensing agreement that acknowledges my ownership while allowing Tech Dynamics to incorporate Secure Shield features into your products under specific terms. The silence that followed was profound. I had systematically dismantled their position and offered a face-saving alternative that would still allow them to meet their business needs. The power dynamic had completely reversed. Daniel broke the silence, anger barely contained. This sounds like blackmail. It's a business negotiation, I corrected, between the rightful owner of intellectual property and a company interested in licensing it. The alternative is a public legal battle that would expose Tech Dynamics practices to clients, shareholders, and potential regulatory authorities. One of the board members spoke for the first time. Jack, I think we should discuss this privately before proceeding. Jack nodded stiffly. Miss Taylor, would you excuse us for a few minutes? Of course. I gathered my documents. For transparency, I should mention that I've prepared the code package you requested, configured according to the specifications in my counteroffer. It's ready for implementation whenever we reach an agreement on terms. This was the most delicate part of my strategy, letting them believe they could still get what they wanted through a revised approach. As I left the room, I could hear urgent conversation begin behind me. In the hallway, I maintained my composure while internally reviewing next steps. If they accepted my terms, I would need to carefully structure the licensing agreement to protect my rights. If they refused, my contingency measures were ready. After 20 tense minutes, Marcia opened the door. "We're ready to continue the discussion." I returned to find a noticeably different atmosphere. The board members had moved closer to the center, and Frank was frantically making notes on legal documents. Jack attempted to reclaim authority with a businesslike tone. "Ginny, we've considered your position. While we maintain that the company has legitimate interest in your work, we're willing to discuss a licensing arrangement rather than full transfer of ownership." "I appreciate that approach," I responded. "To be clear, any agreement must explicitly acknowledge my full ownership of SecureShield, provide fair compensation for its use, and ensure proper attribution in all implementations and marketing." 4 hours of intense negotiation followed. Frank and Thomas, participating by phone, hammered out legal language, while technical specifications were debated point by point. By late afternoon, we had reached a preliminary agreement. Tech Dynamics would license specific components of SecureShield for integration into their products, with appropriate attribution and a royalty structure tied to implementations. "We'll need the code package immediately to begin integration for the Apex presentation," Daniel emphasized as the meeting concluded. "It's ready for transfer as soon as the licensing agreement is formally executed," I assured him. "I've prepared it according to the technical specifications we discussed. What I didn't mention was that the package included the safeguards Sam and I had created, carefully crafted code that would function perfectly while maintaining irrefutable evidence of original authorship. If Tech Dynamics honored our agreement, these safeguards would remain dormant. If they attempted to renege and claim full ownership, the consequences would be immediate and unavoidable." As I left the building that evening, exhaustion and uncertainty warred with cautious optimism. The company had seemingly accepted my terms, but I harbored no illusions about their trustworthiness. The critical test would come when they implemented my code and either honored or violated our agreement. That night, I finalized the code package, double-checking the embedded safeguards and authentication systems. Everything had to work flawlessly, both the security framework itself and the protective measures I'd designed. "Are you sure about this?" Sam asked during our final review. "Once they have the code, they might still try to cut you out. That's why we built in the safeguards," I reminded him. "If they honor the agreement, everything functions normally. If they try to remove my attribution or claim sole ownership, their systems will make the truth very public," he finished with a grim smile. "It's elegant. Still risky, though. Sometimes the right moves are the risky ones. In chess, the most powerful moments often come when you offer a sacrifice your opponent can't resist, luring them into a position that seems advantageous until the trap closes. Tech Dynamics wanted my code badly enough to agree to my terms. The question was whether they would honor those terms once they had what they wanted. At 9 a.m. the next morning, I delivered the code package as promised, after the preliminary licensing agreement had been signed. Daniel could barely contain his excitement as the transfer completed, already mapping out the integration for the Apex presentation. "The implementation team will begin work immediately," he informed me. "We'll need you available for consultation during the process." Of course, I agreed. I want this to succeed for everyone involved. As I returned to my regular work, I monitored the implementation progress through various channels. The integration team was working around the clock to incorporate SecureShield into the Tech Dynamics security suite before the crucial Apex meeting scheduled for Monday morning. By Sunday evening, the integration was complete. The implementation had gone smoothly, exactly as expected for a system designed with both functionality and protective measures in mind. Now came the moment of truth. Would Tech Dynamics honor our agreement? Or would they revert to their original plan once they had my code? I slept fitfully that night, knowing that by morning I would have my answer. Monday morning, 6 a.m. My phone exploded with notifications. Emails, texts, missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Something major had happened. The first message I opened was from Allison. "What did you do? The entire system is displaying your name. Call me now." I didn't need to call to know what had happened. Tech Dynamics had made exactly the mistake I had anticipated. Rather than honoring our licensing agreement, they had attempted to remove my attribution and claim full ownership of Secure Shield, and my safeguards had activated precisely as designed. I opened my laptop and navigated to the Tech Dynamics website. Instead of their usual corporate homepage, a simple message filled the screen. Property of GINNY TAYLOR. The same message appeared on every internal system, customer portal, and integrated application. Every digital property owned by Tech Dynamics now prominently displayed my name as the owner of the technology they had attempted to steal. My phone rang again. It was Daniel, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "What have you done to our systems?" "I haven't done anything," I replied calmly. "The protection protocols activated automatically when someone attempted to alter the attribution coding in violation of our agreement. Fix this immediately. I'd be happy to help resolve the situation once Tech Dynamics honors the terms of our licensing agreement." As I explained during negotiations, the code includes safeguards against unauthorized ownership claims. This is corporate sabotage. No. It's automated copyright protection. The system is simply displaying accurate ownership information after detecting an attempt to remove proper attribution. The functionality remains intact. Only the attribution display has been activated. I could hear voices shouting in the background of his call. The company was in chaos. "The Apex presentation is in 2 hours, Daniel hissed. "Their entire executive team will be there. Then, I suggest immediate compliance with our agreement. The attribution display will normalize as soon as proper credit is restored in the code." He hung up without responding. Within minutes, my phone rang again. This time, it was Jack. "Ginny, we need to resolve this situation immediately. Whatever point you're trying to make." "I'm not trying to make a point, Jack. The system is functioning as designed, protecting intellectual property rights. As soon as Tech Dynamics honors the licensing agreement by restoring proper attribution, normal display will resume. We have a major client presentation in less than 2 hours. Then I recommend swift compliance. The technical team knows exactly what changes triggered the protection protocol. Reversing those changes will resolve the situation." 30 minutes later, I received an urgent message from the implementation team requesting my immediate assistance at the office. When I arrived, the atmosphere was one of controlled panic. Developers hunched over terminals, executives huddled in whispered conversations, phones ringing constantly. Daniel intercepted me at the entrance to the development floor, his earlier anger replaced by tightly controlled desperation. "We've restored the original attribution coding, but the display issue persists. We need your help to reset the system." I nodded professionally. "I'll need direct access to the core implementation." As I worked with the technical team, I maintained a helpful, solution-oriented approach. The safeguards had performed exactly as intended, activating when Tech Dynamics attempted to erase my contribution and continuing to display the ownership message until proper verification codes were entered. Not just reverting the changes they had made, the protection system requires specific validation that the licensing terms are being honored, I explained. Simple code reversal isn't sufficient. After I entered the appropriate authentication sequences, the systems gradually returned to normal display. But the ownership message remained embedded in the metadata, visible to anyone who examined the code structure carefully enough. With 15 minutes to spare before the Apex presentation, the immediate crisis was resolved. Tech Dynamics digital properties returned to their normal appearance. with my attribution appropriately incorporated into the product information. Jack approached me as the technical team confirmed full resolution. His expression was a complex mixture of anger, respect, and resignation. The board has called an emergency meeting for this afternoon. They've requested your attendance. I'll be there, I agreed. Before the board meeting, reports began circulating about what had happened. Despite the company's efforts to control the narrative, word spread quickly among employees, clients, and eventually industry publications. Screenshots of the property of GINNY TAYLOR display had been captured and shared widely. Apex Systems executives, arriving for their presentation, had questions about the incident they had heard about. The official explanation, a technical glitch during implementation, satisfied no one, especially when several Apex technical staff recognized the nature of the protection system. By the time the emergency board meeting convened at 3 p.m., the situation had evolved beyond a private dispute. Industry blogs were reporting on the Tech Dynamics attribution incident, with speculation about intellectual property disputes within the company. The company's stock had dropped 7% on rumors of technical instability and governance concerns. The boardroom was filled with tension when I arrived. The full board was present, along with key executives and legal representatives. The atmosphere was markedly different from our previous confrontation. None of the intimidation tactics or power positioning remained. Amanda Porter, a major investor recently appointed to the board, opened the discussion. Ms. Taylor, the events of this morning have raised serious concerns about Tech Dynamics' intellectual property practices. We'd like to hear your perspective on what happened and why. For the next hour, I provided a detailed, factual account of my experience, supported by the extensive documentation I had gathered. I explained how my independent work had been targeted, the pattern of similar incidents involving other employees, and the technical protection measures I had implemented to safeguard my intellectual property rights. As I spoke, I could see the growing realization among board members that the issue extended far beyond a single disputed innovation. The systematic nature of the company's practices, the targeting of specific employees, and the attempted circumvention of a signed agreement painted a damning picture of corporate culture and executive behavior. If these allegations are accurate, Amanda stated, looking directly at Jack and Daniel, they represent serious governance failures and potential legal liability. Frank attempted to minimize the situation. These are complex intellectual property matters with room for interpretation. Attempting to remove contracted attribution after signing a licensing agreement isn't a matter of interpretation, Amanda interrupted. It's a breach of contract at minimum. The discussion continued for another hour, with increasing focus on the broader pattern of behavior rather than just the Secure Shield incident. Jack, Daniel, and Marcia offered various defenses and explanations, but the documentation I had provided, combined with the morning's very public demonstration of attempted ownership appropriation, was compelling. Finally, the board chairman called for a private session, asking all non-board members, including me and the executives, to step out. As we waited in separate areas, the power dynamic had completely reversed. The executives who had once threatened my career now avoided eye contact, while other employees subtly indicated support and solidarity. After 90 minutes, we were called back in. The chairman's expression was grave as he delivered the board's decision. Pending a full investigation of these allegations, Jack Harmon, Daniel Preston, Marcia Wilson, and Frank Thompson are placed on administrative leave. An interim management team will be appointed immediately to ensure business continuity. Ms. Taylor, the board acknowledges your ownership of the Secure Shield framework and commits to honoring the licensing agreement as negotiated. The executives received the news with varying reactions, from Jack's tight-lipped anger to Marcia's stunned silence. Whatever they had expected from this meeting, it wasn't this outcome. As the meeting concluded, Amanda Porter approached me privately. We'll need your cooperation during the investigation. The board is committed to understanding the full scope of these practices and making appropriate changes. I'll provide whatever information I can, I assured her. My goal has always been fair recognition of intellectual property rights, not just for myself, but for everyone affected. That should have been the company's goal as well, she noted with frustration. The fact that it wasn't represents a fundamental failure of leadership. Over the next several days, the situation continued to evolve rapidly. The interim management team, led by Amanda Porter, moved quickly to stabilize operations and client relationships. The Apex presentation had proceeded with qualified success. The technical merits of the security solution impressed their team, even as questions lingered about the attribution incident. A formal investigation was launched, with an independent law firm reviewing company practices related to employee innovations. Former employees, including Sarah and Stephanie, were contacted for information about their experiences. The press coverage expanded beyond industry publications to mainstream business news. Tech giant accused of systematic IP theft from employees read one headline. Engineer's clever code trap exposes corporate exploitation, declared another. 1 week after the incident, Tech Dynamics issued a public statement acknowledging serious concerns about past intellectual property practices and committing to a comprehensive review and reform process. The statement specifically recognized my ownership of SecureShield and announced a legitimate licensing agreement for its use in company products. For me, the vindication was profound but bittersweet. The company culture I had initially believed in had proven corrupt, but my stand had created an opportunity for meaningful change. As more affected employees came forward with their stories, the full scope of the problem became clear, along with the path toward resolution. The chess game had ended not with a single checkmate, but with a complete transformation of the board. 3 weeks after the system attribution incident, Tech Dynamics convened a special board meeting to address the findings of the independent investigation. The results were damning. Systematic exploitation of employee innovations affecting 27 individuals over 5 years, discriminatory targeting of women and minorities, and explicit executive direction to appropriate intellectual property through contractual overreach and intimidation. The consequences were swift and significant. Jack, Daniel, Marcia, and Frank were permanently removed from their positions. The board appointed Amanda Porter as interim CEO with a mandate to transform company culture and practices. The findings represent a profound betrayal of trust, Amanda stated in the company-wide meeting announcing the changes. Tech Dynamics was founded on innovation and integrity, principles we will now work to truly honor rather than merely claim. The company established a comprehensive remediation program for affected current and former employees. Each case would be individually reviewed, with appropriate recognition, compensation, and in some cases, restoration of intellectual property rights. Sarah Jenkins, whose authentication system had been appropriated and patented under Jack and Daniel's names, received formal recognition as the true inventor, along with retroactive royalties for its use in company products. Stephanie Madison and others similarly received long overdue acknowledgement and compensation. For me, the resolution extended beyond personal vindication. Tech Dynamics honored our licensing agreement for SecureShield, with appropriate attribution and fair compensation. But more importantly, the company implemented fundamental changes to prevent similar situations in the future. New intellectual property policies clearly defined the boundaries between company and personal work. Monitoring practices were reformed with transparent disclosure requirements. Most significantly, a new innovation partnership program was established, allowing employees to develop personal projects with company resources in exchange for first license option rights rather than ownership claims. During this transformation period, I received an unexpected offer from Amanda, a senior executive position leading the company's new innovation ethics division. The role would involve overseeing the reformed intellectual property practices and ensuring ethical treatment of employee innovations. After careful consideration, I declined. I appreciate the opportunity, I told her during our meeting, but I believe I can make a greater impact independently. I understand, but I'm disappointed. Amanda admitted. Your perspective would be invaluable in rebuilding this company. My experience will still inform your reforms, I assured her. But my path lies elsewhere. That elsewhere had been taking shape in my mind since the resolution began. With my ownership of SecureShield firmly established and the licensing agreement generating substantial income, I had the resources to pursue a new venture. 6 weeks after declining Amanda's offer, I launched Taylor Security Solutions, a company built on principles of innovation, integrity, and equitable recognition of contributions. Our founding team included several former Tech Dynamics employees, including Allison, who brought her marketing expertise to our new venture. Our business model was deliberately different from traditional tech companies. Employee contracts explicitly protected personal innovations. Compensation included equity sharing that acknowledged contributions beyond salary expectations. Collaborative innovations resulted in shared credit and rewards rather than corporate appropriation. The industry took notice, not just of our ethical approach but also of our technical excellence. SecureShield, now freely developed without corporate constraints, quickly established itself as an industry-leading security framework. Major clients, including eventually Apex Systems, chose our solutions not despite our ethical stance but because of it. 1 year after the attribution incident, Tech Dynamics had transformed under Amanda's leadership. The company operated with new policies, new leadership, and a renewed commitment to ethical innovation. While their reputation had suffered initially, their transparent handling of the situation and genuine reforms had begun rebuilding trust. During this period, I established the Tech Innovation Justice Fund, using a portion of licensing revenues to provide legal support for engineers and developers facing intellectual property disputes with employers. The fund offered resources that many individuals couldn't access on their own, helping level the playing field in conflicts between creative individuals and powerful corporations. Sarah Jenkins joined the fund as its first director. We're fighting the battle I couldn't fight on my own, she explained during the launch announcement. No innovative person should lose their life's work because they can't afford legal representation. In perhaps the most satisfying development, several major tech companies proactively reformed their own intellectual property practices after observing the Tech Dynamics situation. The industry was slowly recognizing that respecting creator rights wasn't just ethically correct, it was good business. On the anniversary of the incident, I received an unexpected message from Jack Harmon. After leaving Tech Dynamics, he had spent months reflecting on his leadership and the culture he had created. I built a successful company by taking advantage of people who trusted me, he wrote. It took losing everything to recognize the fundamental flaw in that approach. I can't undo the harm I caused, but I want you to know that your courage forced me to confront truths I had been avoiding for years. His message concluded with a simple acknowledgement. You were right to stand your ground. The innovations we create reflect our unique contributions to the world. Taking credit for another's creation doesn't just harm them, it ultimately destroys the very spirit of innovation we claim to value. I didn't respond immediately, needing time to process this unexpected reflection from someone who had once threatened to destroy my career. Eventually, I sent a simple reply. Thank you for your honesty. Creating something meaningful requires integrity as much as ingenuity. I hope you find a way forward that honors both. 2 years after the attribution incident, Taylor Security Solutions had grown to 60 employees and established a reputation for both technical excellence and ethical leadership. Our approach to collaborative innovation had become a case study at business schools, and I occasionally lectured on ethical technology development and intellectual property rights. The lesson I shared with students and industry audiences was consistent. Documentation and preparation are your chess pieces. Position them carefully before you need them. In the innovation economy, your ideas are your most valuable asset. Protect them with the same care you invested in creating them. More personally, I learned that principles require both courage and strategy. Standing up to powerful interests isn't enough. You must do so from a position of strength, with evidence, allies, and carefully considered contingency plans. The experience transformed me from a technical specialist into an advocate and entrepreneur. Each role leveraged different aspects of my abilities, but all rested on the foundation of integrity that had guided my response to Tech Dynamics' actions. As our company continued to grow, I maintained a simple plaque on my desk. It contained a chess queen piece and the words that had appeared on Tech Dynamics systems during those pivotal hours: property of GINNY TAYLOR. Not as a reminder of triumph over an opponent, but as a commitment to the principle that had started it all. What we create belongs first to ourselves, and recognition of that truth is non-negotiable. Have you ever had to stand up for something that rightfully belonged to you? What documentation or evidence helped you protect what was yours? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to my channel for more stories about standing up for yourself in the workplace, and share with someone who might need inspiration to protect their own creations. Thank you for joining me on this journey through one of the most challenging and ultimately rewarding experiences of my life. May you always have the courage to defend what's rightfully yours.